Hello, everybody. Today I am joined by Dr. Fantasy Philip Chase, and we're going to be discussing The Judging Eye by R. Scott Bakker. So, hello, Philip. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited. Now we are on the Aspect Emperor series within the Second Apocalypse series. So, and I had a great time talking with you and Jimmy and Raph about the first trilogy in the Second Apocalypse, the Prince of Nothing trilogy. But now we're moving on, and I'm excited to discuss this with you. So, very cool stuff.
Yes. And spoiler alert for the first trilogy. This is book one in the second trilogy, but it takes place so many years after the end of the first trilogy. So there's absolutely no way to talk about this book without talking about who lives, who dies, or any sort of manner. So I just want to preface the discussion by saying that. And I also want to say that I just want to say right away that I will likely mispronounce words in this book. There are several names of places, interesting names of characters, and I probably won't get it all right, but I'll do my best
And
to
just
start out.
because someone will write this in the comments, I'm sure it's actually a tetralogy, not a trilogy. This one, yeah, I'm sure someone will call you on that.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm here for it. I am
same.
here for it. I will say right away that this book is competing for my book of the year at this point. I loved it that much.
Wow.
There's something about Baker's writing that just feels like a vortex to me. It just pulls me in and the darkness seeps around me. And I loved my experience reading this book and experiencing the in-depth character psychology, the interesting settings, which we'll get into.
Mhm.
And I guess right away, I'll just ask you, Philip, what was your experience like reading Baker's prose again or reading this book? And
Yeah, Baker, I've said it probably a bunch of times, but he is an immensely talented writer. There is no doubt about it. Talented in terms of his prose, which I find so rich and interesting, and there are very few writers who could get away with as much exposition as he has. But he's just so good. I don't care. He's I mean, super talented. Uh, at the same time, I do feel that this is such a bleak series. I mean, it is so. We were talking about it earlier, and I think in our previous discussions, it might have been Raph who called one of the characters that came in like sad Gandalf, and then when you meet the non-man or the non-men in here, you realize that these are sad crazy elves essentially. And there's just so much bleakness to this that I can't say when I'm reading Baker's books that I enjoy the experience, but I can say I'm so impressed and in awe of what he's doing. And I like that. I like the challenge that Baker gives me. I like that he portrays humanity without any hesitation to show us rolling in the muck. That we are. He just explores our primalness in ways that not too many authors are going to look that unflinchingly at what are our just basic motives. We're going to talk about this, but the question of do we have any free will at all? Quite a lot of things that a lot of people would shy away from simply because when you think about those topics, it can be kind of it can sweep the rug right out from under you. You feel like, wow, just in a kind of a mind blowing, but a way that makes you feel a bit helpless. So yeah, I have a mixed feeling when it comes to Baker. I think he's brilliant. He should be read, but at the same time, it's not a happy experience to read a story and to realize, yeah, well, that is kind of what we're like in our worst moments. And I want to believe, I want to have hope. I typically will read a story. I don't mind grimdark and that sort of thing, but I like there to be some kind of ray of light in there somewhere. And I just feel like Baker's not giving you that, really.
yeah, it I think enjoy is the wrong word whenever I talk about my experience with Baker, but I would say that I just get so fascinated.
Yeah.
I'm just so fascinated with the way that Baker writes. I think that he is a gifted writer,
Oh
and
yeah.
he portrays the human condition in a way that I just don't often see in fantasy. I I feel exposed. That's the word I always wanna use when I
Yeah.
read Baker. Yeah, I feel exposed, and I feel like, I was talking about this with Philip right beforehand, and I've joked about it with a few people, that this book to me feels like some sort of dark, morbid blend of Lord of the Rings meets Blood Meridian meets Dune, specifically Children of Dune, I would say, which we'll get into, but it does. It feels like it's very exposing, and I don't know of any other book that I've read, specifically, I think with this one that portrays self-hatred to the extent that
Mm,
Baker does with some of the characters, shame, um, yeah, just some of the darker areas of human nature, betrayal.
mm,
And looking at that, and it's like you've seen betrayal in other series before, but he'll look at it almost like it's a living thing, like it has a soul. There's a passage in this book where he actually says that, and it just gets the wheels in your head turning. It makes you feel things. It makes you feel like you're being sucked into a vortex when you're reading the book. So I found that I took my time reading the book. It wasn't a book that I found myself reading quickly. I read a lot of it in a short amount of time, honestly, but at the same time, I found myself wanting to reread passages and just let the whole dark vibe of this story seep in, and there's a lot of darkness, goodness. So,
yeah,
yeah.
that's for sure. I mean, when you look at the many nods to Lord of the Rings in here, from little things like, okay, so he has a version of mithril in there, the special metal that they made out of, what does he call it? Nimel. He calls it Nimel. I mean,
Mm.
it's
Oh,
so
that's right.
obviously mithril.
Okay.
And that is one of the things they were, apparently one of the things that they were mining in the place that feels so like Moria. There are no dwarves though. He have any dwarves. He does it all with elves or non-men, I guess is what they're called here. But yeah, it feels like every time you have a Tolkien nod though, the whole thing with Moria, which, Moria is kind of a scary dark place, I guess, but it has nothing on Kill
Nothing.
nothing on Kill Algis. It is just, and it's because there aren't just scary monsters out there in the dark, lurking and out to get you. There are scary monsters in here as well, and they're right next to you as well. And there's just, it's, oh wow, it's subversive is what it is. It's very subversive in ways that I feel like I actually admire what he's done with his nods to Lord of the Rings in this book, because I feel like they're loving and at the same time very subversive, if that makes any sense at all.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I guess also the thing that comes to my mind is how the gates were open when we get to that
Yeah,
location too.
yeah.
And I love the way he personifies certain settings because I think he talks about it as like a yawning, gaping, dark void, and you get the sense of all the sculpture around it, the archway sculpture around this yawning hole that seems like it's in an endless inhalation. And there are so many descriptions of darkness. I know that this book often gets compared, or this series specifically has a lot of nods to Blood Meridian, and there was a nod to Blood Meridian in The Thousandfold Thought. But something that I really loved about McCarthy's Blood Meridian, and I know you haven't read it, Philip, but
I've only read
McCarthy,
The Road. Yeah.
yeah, Blood Meridian, one of the things that I loved about it is a traveling narrative. There is use of repetition. I did notice some repetition in this book as well, just certain words that would come up here and there, but it's different. But at the same time, Blood Meridian, I feel one of the strengths of it, one of the reasons I love it so much, and this can be seen in some of other of McCarthy's books, is the way that we are going through the desert. And for any lesser author, they might just describe a desert one way. There's a tumbleweed and some dirt here, maybe some types of Jimson weed or something. But the way that McCarthy describes a desert, he has an infinite way of describing every single movement of the desert, every single color, every single shape, everything that happens. It just has this life to it. It has so much vibrancy to it. And I think just the endless ways he's able to describe a setting that so many authors lack imagination for blows my mind, in the sense that although we're not in a desert setting in this particular book, we go through those mines, so to speak, into that darkness. And the way that Baker is able to portray the inky black darkness, and how it gets darker and darker and darker,
Yeah.
the way he's able to describe the darkness in a way that doesn't feel like it's too repetitive, it feels like it has enough variation, is absolutely incredible to me. So
Mm,
I hats off to Baker for that too.
sure. Yeah, and he's tapping into a lot when he's doing this. I mean, he's the darkness, the belly of the whale kind of thing, that moment that is so transformative in so many stories, where the protagonist or the group of adventurers undergo some significant change. But I feel like what he does with the group, we'll get into every different POV and all that later. But what he does with the group that goes through this ordeal is he strips them of all their illusions about themselves. And having gone through such a harrowing experience, they're forced to confront their own deepest fears and their own failures. There's I mean, forget about camaraderie and saving another person. When you're terrified at a certain point, the fear just takes over and you run. And yeah, it's just so so bleak, um, but at the same time so well done and fascinating,
Yes.
and honest. I do feel that Baker is so honest in his writing in a way that's, I think probably when we're reading a lot of narratives where there's some, heroism and that kind of thing, where it might be the case that we are uh, deluding ourselves slightly in participating in such a journey and feeling. I mean, that's what stories are for to some degree, though, aren't they? To give us meaning and all that. But Baker just strips away the meaning. I feel like,
Yes.
yeah.
And I mean, I want to be clear, I love that kind of fantasy too. I was just talking about this recently, about my experience with Guy Gavriel Kay, and how, even though although Kay doesn't use a lot of magic in some of his stories, he still brings out those ideals of fantasy, the feeling of camaraderie like you were talking about, and bravery, courage, truth, honor, and you feel those ideals and you feel inspired reading it. And I think that those ideals are they're very associated with fantasy. They're associated with the genre, and they're one of the reasons I love the genre. Not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons I love the genre. You don't quite get that in a Baker book. You don't
Nope.
get that in this book particularly, but there is some really interesting contrast. There's some interesting conversations. And so I'm trying to think of the best place to start. I guess we are with the new empire under Kellis's rule, under the aspect emperor, as he's referred to. We learn at the beginning that there has been a bounty that he has put on the scalps of Shrank, which are these
Yeah.
really vile creatures that we encounter in this book.
They're kind of
Um,
like orcs, and you
hmm,
realize that they were twisted non-men, I believe. I mean, that seems to be that's what I took from this, is that
okay, yeah,
the Strunk are very much analogs to orcs, but and even to the degree that orcs were twisted elves, that Melkor or Sauron or whatever twisted and made into nasties, and that the Strunk seem to be actually derived from non-men that were twisted by what were they called, the Inkori,
and Korai.
Inkoroi?
Mhm. I
Yeah.
think that's right. Yeah.
Did I get all that? I maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but
No,
that's
yeah, I mean, feel free to let us know in the comment section, because I'm not sure I followed all that, like the creation of those or how those came about. I'm
but
sure it
yeah,
was
I mean,
explained somewhere,
they
but
are, and of course they are not orcs. They're.
right,
I think, Baker will do something different with them, I'm sure. But yeah.
definitely. Yeah, so I found that interesting. Of course, the scalping or the bounty on scalps reminded me also of Blood Meridian in that sense, but this particular story, it I guess we'll go ahead and start out with the character that is named Sarweel, if I've got that pronunciation correct, in the kingdom of Sakar. I'm gonna get that wrong too. Is it?
Arpus.
Thank you. So this is a really interesting storyline where we learn about how his father is referring to Kellis as a demon. He
Yep.
says to beware the demon. Kellis comes, swoops in, and he ends up killing the king. He ends up killing Surreal's father. He tries to get Surreal's father to submit peacefully, and that doesn't work. And we also learned that this kingdom is known as being a kingdom of conquerors for thousands of years. They have always had this reputation of being the conquerors, of being the winners, of being strong rulers. And then when Surreal is faced by the Aspect Emperor, he talks about forgiveness and talks about how he's not the demon that his father made him out to be. So thoughts about that. I just thought it was an interesting contrast that Surreal has experienced his father, who he reveres, giving him all these stories about this demon named Kellis, who acts as Aspect Emperor. And then he meets the Aspect Emperor, who's so gentle and so seems so kind. And it talks about forgiveness. Thoughts on that?
I think that I first of all, I admire Baker's choice to make Sorwheel the primary narrative perspective that we get along the Great Ordeal. I think that was a brilliant choice because we get the conflict within this young character. He's now the king of Sarkarpus, knows he's being used by Kelhus, and still has that voice of his father in his head telling him, he's ashamed because he's basically been forced to go along with Kelhus. And yet at the same time, we see how charismatic Kelhus is. And you feel Sorwheel's being tempted to be a follower. Every time he sees Kelhus, there's that charisma, that magic, that he's being enticed to believe. Like, you see the portrayal of faith is something I find very interesting that he is exploring in this series in general, as he did in the Prince of Nothing trilogy. I mean, that was really all about, that was basically in the way that this book is to some degree, to a lesser degree, really uses things like Lord of the Rings, like the Moria and all that. The previous trilogy was essentially modeled on the First Crusade, and which allowed Baker to explore faith in so many ways. But here you really see Kelhus is now a god. He has proclaimed himself a god. He is worshipped as a god. And there's plenty of compelling evidence that he is so far above us as to seem divine in status. And yet there are the doubters out there. There are the people who are like, no, there's a Camian. We'll talk about him later. Because his feelings about Kelhus are really important as well.
Mhm.
But I love how Sorwheel, we get that conflict. We get this kid who's trying to be faithful to the ideals of his own culture, which has been annihilated. He's being forced along this journey, the Great Ordeal, to save humanity from this evil out there, the consult and the possible return of the no god and all that. And he's being swept up into it, but then he has serious doubts which keep coming up, and he's being reinforced in those doubts by the one guy that he meets up with, Zoranga,
Oh,
who is
yes. Mhm.
also a doubter because he's read the book that Acamian wrote and believes this Kelhus guy, maybe he's way above us and he looks at us like, most people would look at ants, but he's not a god, so Sorwheel is being reinforced by him. And at the same time, he's being tugged back and forth. I haven't quite figured out what the role of Sorwheel's slave is. But he is a worshiper, as it turns out, of that goddess that is in opposition to Kelhos's claims to be divine. So that would be Yahweh. So slave that was basically given to Sorwheel. Porsparian is his name. Porsparian. What's his deal? Is he doing Kelos's bidding? Does Kelos not realize that this guy is a devotee of this goddess Yahweh that is in opposition to his claims of divinity? So that's kind of an interesting thing going on there. So Sorwheel's being tugged in these different directions, and it's
And
really
yeah, and in addition to that, in his original kingdom in Sacarpus, it said that slaves were anathema. So having a slave is very much against his cultural upbringing.
Yep.
So he doesn't seem to know what to do with the slave at first, or has conflicting feelings about treating the slave as a slave. But they end up having a really interesting connection. And then when he discovers Yatwer and this weird magic as the slave takes the food and puts it in the ground, and there's that weird mouth. I don't know. There were some weird magical mouth things happening. He starts to think about betraying Kellis. And at the same time, Kellis has a plan. Kellis's plan appears to be to have his sons, his two eldest sons, befriend Sorwheel.
Yeah. And Sorwheel knows it. He knows he's being tempted by these very charismatic people, particularly I think it's Cayutas.
Sounds right.
That's saying it right. But he's the eldest son of Kelhos and Esmenet. He's not the eldest, quote unquote, son, because you have Moengus, who was named after Kelhos's father, who was really the son of Neir. We know that. And Kelhos's first wife, Serwe, who died on the circumfix, was there with Kelhos. So we know that Moengus is not actually the son of Kelhos or Esmenet, but he's been sort of adopted, I guess, as a son, which is interesting to me because Kelhos seems to be able to put aside often he's an interesting figure, and we're only seeing him from the outside now. We're not getting his inner thoughts at all in this. I don't know if we will later in the series or not, but we did get his inner thoughts earlier in the Prince of Nothing trilogy, and we could feel his, okay, I got to manipulate these people. I got to use these people, right? We got that all this time. Now we're seeing him as a kind of almost divine in stature, and we don't know what's going on in his head, which I think is deliberate on Bakker's part, but yeah, he uses people in a way that seems so impersonal, right? I mean, it's interesting that he doesn't seem to care that Moengus is not his biological son. He's going to use Moengus. He sees his value, and he's going to use him, and he does that with everyone. And he also, I mean, just from a personal moral perspective, some of the ways in which he uses people and punishes people, I find repugnant. Even though I'm supposed to see him as so charismatic and so amazing, I'm not really rooting for him, even though he says he's saving the world and blah, 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 by fighting. And what is his deal? What is his game, right? I mean, that is something of that you find yourself wondering about a lot. I have no doubt that he wants to fight the no god and in Chorai or in Korai, or however you say that, in Koroi. That's what he's doing. But why? Why is he doing this? Is he, he's making it seem like he's saving humanity, and that sort of thing. But does it have something to do with the Dunyain and their actual agenda for the world?
Yes. I'm constantly wondering what Kellis is thinking or what his end game is, just like you said. And because like you said, like pairing him with that slave, he's always usually a step ahead of everything. So why would he do that? He has to know the slave is part of the Yatwer cult. So
you would think. So yeah, why? Why would he let a slave who is enticing this young man away from him do that? Okay. And you don't think Kelhos would make a mistake like overlooking or not realizing that this slave is in fact a covert operator for Yahweh, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I felt for Surreal though.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how shameful it would be to be in his position, how uncomfortable. He's just between a rock and a hard place, so to speak.
He is.
And I feel like we really get in depth into what he's experiencing, into that conflict. There's so much that's explored about that, as well as just the camps in general where he is. The tents, the banners, the smells. Like Baker does not hold back on atmosphere in any of his settings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but but also with the imagery of the circumvix, as you mentioned too, just being omnipresent, and Kellis himself floating cross-legged. Did I get
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah.
I mean, he
Yeah.
also comes from the sky at one point, like just some weird magic there. So it's kind of understandable that people would buy into his game.
Yeah. And poor Sorwheel wonders in that moment after Kelhus kills the well, what are they? The things with the faces. You know what I'm talking about, right? The things with all
Yes.
the tentacle faces.
I thought about you doing that when I read about it too.
Oh.
You did it last time. You're like, the things with the
So
eyes
he
and the
kills
ears.
them, or he kills that
Mhm.
one that presumably was there to assassinate him or whatever. And he's like,
Skin was it a skin is that the same thing as a skin spy, or is that something
yeah, that's
different?
a skin
Skin
spy.
spy, okay.
And he was
Yeah.
like, "How long have you been dead, Bob?" Or that's not.
That's right.
How long have you been dead, Bob? And then he's like, "Ah!" And then Kellis grabs him and does his and chops him into bits with his magic, you know.
Yes.
But then
Yes.
he goes right to poor Sorwheel, and you feel like, is he orchestrating every single moment of this? Like he
Mhm.
knew that that was a skin spy, and he chose to dice it into little bits right before he talked to Sorwheel. He is doing all of this on purpose, isn't he? And then Sorwheel's like, wait, he must know from my face that I intend to betray him. He must know that I'm not with him. And even when I say, yeah, okay, thanks a lot, but Kelhus only says, good boy, and gives him a little pat on the head, right? So
Yeah.
what's the deal? Why is he doing this? Yeah.
Well, there was one passage somewhere, I don't know exactly where it was in the book, where I can't remember what conversation it was or where this happened, but there was some conversation about the way to deal with Sacarpus, the way to deal with that prince is through a gentle hand, that it
Yeah.
wouldn't work to take a more forceful approach with that particular kingdom. And I
Yeah.
maybe because of their reputation as conquerors, I'm not sure, but he's doing this very purposefully, and
Yeah.
I think he set it up. It felt like that whole entire thing was a setup. The
Right.
skin spy, everything, because he doesn't go straight to Surreal, but Surreal feels like he sticks out immediately with the way that his expression towards Kellis is different than everyone else in the room.
Yeah.
And so Kellis takes his time finally getting to him and then asking him a question where Surreal says, "Yes, yes, I I bow to you," so to speak. So
Yeah. I feel for Sorwheel, as you said earlier, rock and hard place. Just to survive is an act of defiance, but in order to survive he has to constantly betray his culture and the memory of his father and do things that are shameful to him. So he's really, it's an awful situation for him to be in, and yet Kelhus seems to be using him in order to have, I assume the goal that Kelhus has in mind is to have no hostile entity that is behind his back while he's doing the great ordeal. Like he had to control this city, this group, and the best way to do that is to have this little fellow along with him. So he's kind of a hostage along with a whole group of essentially hostages. They're part of the great ordeal. They're part of the army and everything, but they're really separated into this one like unit within the Kidruhil or whatever they're that are commanded by Cayutas, and everybody knows that they're hostages, and they're kind of looked at with a fair amount of contempt. And Sorwheel knows that everybody calls him, horse king and that kind of thing.
yes. Oh,
He
that's right.
feels constantly like he's being insulted, and he doesn't understand the language and all of that. So yeah, I feel for the kid. Yeah.
But he's also being educated too. He gets a scholar, some kind of sorcerer scholar,
Right.
remember, who's paired with him. but it's through that other character,
He is called Zoronga.
Zoranga, yes, that
Yeah.
he learns about a commune, and he learns that maybe there's more to learn about the Aspect Emperor. He starts to take the same idea as a commune, like, maybe I need to learn more about who Kellis is. Where does he come from? What is he? Is the question he wants to know.
And I feel like he also is constantly having his face rubbed in the fact that he might not have any free will in all of this at all. Like,
Yeah.
feels so helpless, like he's being used, and he has so this much room to maneuver. And that's one way in which Baker is, I think, presenting this question of free will to us. Like, this is a kid who's been forced, he's been stripped of everything, and is forced to confront the idea that maybe I'm helpless. He feels helpless, and that's the real source of his frustration. So, and
It is, and then
maybe,
it's an awkward position to be in because he still retains the, I guess, the noble title. Like, he
yeah,
still,
yeah, he's called king. He's called
yeah.
by his translator, educator guy, whom he regards with some contempt because he's a reader, right? He's a bookish guy.
Mhm.
He's called, great king and all that sort of thing. But he feels like maybe it's sarcastic almost, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an awkward position. It's so uncomfortable for him.
Hmm.
And it's uncomfortable too for, let's go to Esmenet, I guess, to move
Yeah.
in. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Esmenet, right away, I feel like there was just such a conflict with her feeling like almost imposter syndrome in this Empress position. Thoughts on Esmenet, though?
Yeah. Well, I will say one thing, a general thing that I'm actually pleased about, because when I read Prince of Nothing, there was a bleakness to the world in general, but it was especially awful for women. And there was not a single example of a female character who was both positive and who was empowered. There was the mother of the emperor who you could say argue had some power, but she was hideous and awful, and I don't think she's a positive example. Whereas, and there were women like Serway and Esmenet that I liked, but they were constantly being brutalized and used and just stomped all over. And I believe in my heart that Baker is not a misogynist, and that
No.
he is simply exploring the the effects of a brutally patriarchal culture, and he is portraying that, and that's a job that's, I think, very important to do. But I always felt just kind of like, oh, this is just so bleak, and it's so horrible to be a woman in this world, especially here. I am very happy to see, you have Esmenet, and later we'll talk about Mimara, who also gets brutalized and used and all that, which is
Mhm.
horrible. But I feel like there's Baker's beginning to move into a situation where, Kelhus has allowed women to pursue magic. They're witches still, okay, but there's a whole contingent of them which his daughter is leading. So there's that. And as Menet, I feel like, is a character who, yes, she feels she's in over her head. She feels like, in some ways, she's also being used. But you see her making decisions. You see her responding to the hostility around her. You see her intelligence being acknowledged, at least by some people. So I feel like it's still very bleak and it's still very difficult, but we're getting some acknowledgement of women who are empowered through their own volition, that they are making decisions. And Esmenet is a character that, I think we are meant to feel sympathy for. We're meant to root for. Um, but at the same time, it does seem like she's kind of in over her head a bit, here. But
Absolutely. She's in over her head, um, and she's dealing with these children who can read her mind, and then it's
uh,
so awful. I think I felt the most for that one child that's screaming that they have to lock away for so many years.
oh, in Realitas, yeah,
Thank you for the name, yes.
yeah.
There was a scene, I think it was that kid, it might be a different kid, but I remember there was a kid I wrote down who looked her in the eyes when he was only a few years old, and he says, "Don't hate yourself for hating me, mom." hate
Yeah.
yourself for who you are.
That's yeah. I think that. I mean, it sounds like a Kelmomas thing to say, but I think it was in Realitas. Yeah, yeah. Before he was locked in that room to basically. And why does he go crazy? He has the perceptiveness that Kelhus has, but there's something that he doesn't have at the same time. But he seems to see the world for what it is, and that creates an overwhelming despair and insanity in him, like the combination of Kelhus and Esmenet. And there's that whole little apparently he could not have like viable children, viable heirs with other women. That Esmenet
Mhm.
somehow smart enough to be a vessel for his children, although some of them came out pretty cracked.
Yes.
But some of them came out functional and and with some of Kelhos's gifts, as it were. So it's interesting, and as you say, the creepiest thing is, of course, Kelmomas, the twin, who
Yes.
who is clever enough to pretend to be innocent, but orchestrates the death of his twin. He's listening to some inner voice.
Mm.
Is he going on the same path as in Realitas? You have to wonder. But yeah, what did you think of
Sorry,
Kel?
that's my dog, by the way, if you all
Oh,
hear whining in the background. And my
okay.
dog here. It's
What
okay,
did you think of Kel
you're
Because
there.
he so creeped me out. I don't like that little kid very much.
Oh, so disturbing.
Yeah,
So disturbing. So he kills his own brother.
and later
Uh, I
killed.
got the I got the impression that, yeah, he does have, like you said, the inner voice that
Yeah,
talks to him and tells him to fear his uncle, to fear Maithanet. So I wondered about that, especially as that plays a role in the end when he tries to manipulate Esmenet into being suspicious of Maithanet. That I yeah, just similar to Kellis, I wonder the same thing for his son, for Kelmum is it Kelmomus?
Kelmomas.
Kelmomus.
Yeah,
And I think what's so heartbreaking is I got the impression that Esmenet, she never thought she would have children, especially after, Mimara,
yeah.
but then Kellis, of course, proves her wrong, and she ends up having, I think, like, something along the lines of, I wanna say 8 children, is that right? Or is it 7 children? Maybe it's
Well,
7 children through Kellis?
the ones that she gives birth to.
3, 4,
So
5, 6.
there's a daughter who is there a daughter who so you have Thelio, you have Cayutas, who's the eldest son, and he seems more or less like he doesn't love, though. That's the thing. She never felt that he loved
That's what
her.
I was gonna say, yes. Like, I think that part of the tragedy for her is that after losing her eldest daughter, she feels and gets reunited with her later, yes, but
Right,
she still tries to have these children, or she's able to have children with Kellis, but never feels like she bonds with them, like they love her back.
right.
And so what she is so happy about is that when she has the twins, which are her last children, the youngest children, when she has Kelmomis and Samarmis,
Yeah,
she gets the sense that they love her back, even though they're a little weird, they're a little off, like, well, Kelmomis specifically doesn't seem to have a conscience, doesn't feel guilty, and we get that right away at the beginning. I really loved the way
yeah.
his character was introduced. He was being horribly brutal to that beetle or that bug he was playing with, or was it a bug? I can't remember now.
He was torturing an insect, pulling its legs off.
Yes. Yes, he was torturing an insect, and he was looking at the insects and thinking about how people are similar. There was some kind of way he was looking at people as being similar to insects, and he, yeah, right away, you get the sense this kid doesn't have a conscience. He doesn't feel
Yeah,
guilty about
he's a
things.
sociopath. Yeah,
Mhm, sociopath, yes.
yeah.
But she feels a sense of love towards him because he at least acts as though he loves her. I
He
guess he
pretends. He knows that he's fooling his mother, that
yeah.
she wants to believe that he loves her back, but he just is totally fooling her and everyone else. The only one who might have actually loved her was Samarmas.
I know. Ugh, I think Samarmis did love her,
Yeah,
and sadly, Samarmis just, something, I guess, was off. He grew up mentally challenged, and I got the impression that I guess Kalmomus ends up murdering him by putting olive oil on the
Yep.
balcony.
The railing. Yeah. By convincing him to try to balance on it and then
Right.
olive oil there, and he falls on
Mm.
his spear. Yeah. Yeah, Kelmomas just seems like a sociopath who enjoys manipulating people and seeing. He's like a Yago kind of. If you've read,
Oh, yeah.
he's
Yeah.
kind of like a Yago like character who just gets his jollies from manipulating people and seeing the chaos that ensues. That's my impression of him so far.
That makes sense, especially as he's, like, planting those seeds at the end about Maithanet to Esmenet. Like,
Yep.
yes. Mhm.
So he
Yeah.
has his father's perceptiveness. I don't know if he has the propensity for magic. Some of the kids do, some don't. Like Cayutas is perceptive, but he doesn't have the magic power. Whereas Theliopa has or there's the one daughter who actually Serwa, who is the witch who has
Oh,
the
right.
magic power,
Mhm.
right? Uh,
Mhm.
Theliopa is the one who's also very like incapable of loving, seems very just kind of almost robotic and fragile, but is useful as a useful tool still.
Yeah.
Whereas Kelmomas is kind of a sociopath, really, and I feel like he's going to be a force of destruction and chaos in future books here. So yeah, we
Um,
don't get to know Sarah very much. Sarah is the one who's in charge of the Swayal Sisterhood, which is what the new school for women who have magic is, right?
I imagine we'll get her in future books,
I hope
but I
so.
have to say that I really appreciated that. I never wanna say the word enjoy, but I was fascinated with the chapter leading up to, Samarmus's death. As tragic and awful as it was pretty incredible the way I really appreciated the way that Baker he switched back and forth between perspectives there, between Esmenet having that conversation with Maithanet, talking about Yatwer, talking about what they're gonna do, as far as that's concerned in that situation, and then going back and forth with Kalmomis saying, "Hey, can you do this? Can you do this?" Doing all these tricks, leading him towards the balcony
The
while
tension
the
was just so much,
ugh.
increase for every moment of that scene. Yeah.
Just the little kids and the adults, and the little kids and the adults. Really interesting the way he did that.
What do you think of how when they were babies, they only would stare at each other?
Oh my
And
god.
then Kel moments. I mean, Baker does the creepiest things here. And there was that moment when who was it that said something that snapped Kelmomus out of it? And then
Yes.
going on, he was like, I'm gonna be a force of chaos, and I'm gonna be, he knew as even as a child that he could see things, that he could perceive
I
things. He was
know I
very
wrote this
he's
down
probably like
somewhere.
Cayutas in the sense that he would pick up a language easily, like, and also Kelos, of course. So anyway, yeah, what
It
was going on with them looking in each other's, gazing in each other's eyes as a reflection of each other, and that somehow Kalmomus is able to break out of that. And what if would Samarmus have been different if he had been the one to wake up first, or was he always going to be what he was? And is the voice that's in Kalmomus's head, is that Samarmus or is that something else? Or were they in this like dialogue with each other? I had first thought that Samarmus was going to prove to be also deceptive and extremely bright, but he wasn't. He seemed to be to.
Mhm.
Did he give a part of himself to Kelmomas to make Kelmomas? I don't know, but I'm fascinated by what Baker does there with the two of them.
Yeah, the line was, "Beasts move, men reflect, gods made real make real."
Yes,
So, that
as a
line
priest or something said that again and again, right?
yes. Yeah, I think that that was the line that made him think of what he was doing in that moment too when he killed his brother. But the strange thing is that that voice was in his head. There was a voice in his head
Yeah,
before he killed his brother, but
yeah,
after he killed his brother, there was a voice that said, "Why didn't you kill me sooner?" or something along those
exactly,
lines.
exactly. Yeah,
And then oddly and, we talked about how he's very much aware of everything he's saying to Esmenet. He's very manipulative, but he
right.
keeps on talking as we. He says, we love you, mom, or we this or
I
that.
can be some armas for you, you know, and
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
How manipulative is he being there? I feel like that's all an act, that he's got his mother wrapped around his little pinky there. And he's pretending to be grieving for some armas. And we
This
know
is kind of off topic a little bit, but have you ever seen the old movie, The Bad Seed?
no,
It's an
no.
old black and white movie, and it's about a little girl who's born without a conscience. But she's
Ah,
has these, like, blonde braids. It's a black and white movie, like I said, and she's like, "I love my mommy. You're the best mommy. I am so lucky to have you." And her mom believes her for the longest time, like, "Oh, I have the best daughter," until her daughter starts going around killing people and doing it's a really good movie, by the way, but it made
yeah.
me think of that quite a bit. It's a very similar
I can see why you would think of that here. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 it was very disturbing, and the heartbreaking thing for Esmenet as well is that Kellis comes into the picture, and he doesn't even grieve his son.
Yeah.
He just sees him as a little blip in this larger, grander thing that he's doing with the great ordeal.
Well, he probably realized that Samarmus was not a very useful tool. So,
Mm,
yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about Kellis is he just uses everyone around him. And that does not make me like him very much.
yeah,
So he's got this, and I don't know how entirely how I feel about him. Is the agenda actually good for humanity that he's pursuing this great ordeal? Uh, you know, is he actually doing something that should be done there? Can we get behind what he's doing in fighting the no god and the consort? They seem bad. They seem like they're not. I don't want to root for them, right? So um, I don't get behind. It's hard for me to get behind any character in Baker's books, to be honest with you, because they're either downright evil and sociopathic and awful, or they're kind of victims who just are rolling around in the muck, and it feels hard to get behind somebody. I think what I felt a little relief in this book was I want to root for Esmenet, um,
yes.
right?
I
So
felt that way. I agree with you about some characters, like, for example, I did not feel like I wouldn't I do not feel a large amount of sympathy for Kelmomus, for example.
it's
He's
horrible. Yeah.
horrible. I don't feel a large amount of sympathy for the yachtwear, who we'll talk about,
Hmm.
uh, Satma Nanaferi.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't feel a lot of sympathy for her.
Yeah. I
At the
don't
same
either.
time, actually, I was surprised because in this book, which I know we're gonna talk about Akamian later, I did actually find myself caring quite a bit. I think I did maybe in the first trilogy. I understand these are very tragic characters and very unlikable characters in a certain way. At the same time, I felt very invested. I felt very invested in Esmenet. I felt very invested in Sir Wheel. I felt for his conflict,
Mm.
and I mean, like I said, I did feel quite a bit for Akamian, and I did not want, is it Mimara? I did not want her to die. Uh, so we'll get to that too,
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get there. Yeah.
but
Cool.
maybe we should go ahead and talk about the Yachtwear tribe while we're in
Let's do that.
Monin, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So Sadma Nanaferi is this older woman who is trying to bring about. And the next book is titled the what was it, the White
look,
Luck Warrior? Is that what it is?
something like that. Yes.
So she believes that she is a vessel of some kind to bring about the coming of this White Luck Warrior, who is going to expose Kellis. Like they're in opposition to Kellis's claims to divinity, and Yatware is one of these many old gods, but one of the most beloved, one of the most worshipped, because she's the god that is worshipped by the poor, by the downtrodden, which are all over this world, is full of people who are just talk about downtrodden. I mean, there's a whole class of slaves and people who are living in just awful poverty and all of that. And you get the sense that someone like Esmenet, who came from that and now is this empress, and that is I think often racked in her conscience, but realizes, okay, I'm this role now. I can't even be human anymore. I have to play this role, and her choices are so limited, being put in this role of empress, that she finds herself having to do things that are very, she feels very cynical about. And you almost feel like, again, no free will. She's been put in this corner, right? And when the Yatwarian cult starts doing its thing, she doesn't really have a lot of choice in how she responds to that, right? They try to get the one woman who's sort of a figurehead on their side, and of course, stupid little Kelmomus just throws everything into chaos by killing that woman in a brutal way, and fully, cutting her to ribbons.
Oh, so creepy. That's so
Horrible.
creepy. There's nothing more creepy than a kid doing that.
But again, I'm not rooting for the Yatwarians at all, because this old lady seems like she's also really not very nice, and also very much in it for her own kind of, I like being powerful. And then there was that whole scene where she starts menstruating, and
Oh yeah. She creates the white luck warrior,
I
right? Is that
guess.
what's happening?
Was she? It seemed like she was. Maybe something is now in her womb. I don't know.
I don't know, but that's a possibility, isn't it? I
Yeah,
guess.
I don't know. After that scene, though, I was like, "What is this? What, Baker? Come on, just quit rubbing my face in this stuff, please."
It was
And
pretty vulgar. It was pretty disgusting. Yeah.
yeah, it was really gross. But it's one
Yeah.
of those things where you can't look away, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
know what was going on in that scene. I mean, it seemed like Nana Fairy got all of them to basically worship her, and she
yeah,
wasn't the original matriarch. The matriarch was the one that got killed,
right.
but it seems like Nana Fairy is gonna be taking over now, and Nana Fairy's an interesting character. Their cult is, what's the word for it? Uh, where they're very, like, self-defeating, or I
Hmm.
can't think of the word, like, where they're very hard on themselves, they're very
Like self-flagellating and that kind of thing?
self-flagellating, yes, I can't think of the right word for it. I don't know. She starts out by saying that, "Oh, well, the Aspect Emperor isn't as powerful as he seems to be." But
Mm.
then she admits that she doesn't really know the extent of his power, so it makes me wonder if she's all talk as well? If she's also kind of a fake leader in some sense?
Yeah, I don't trust her, I don't like
Mhm.
her, I think she's also, you know, she is kind of empowered in a way that, but in a way that's kind of monstrous and unpleasant. But yeah,
Mm.
I guess we'll see, what comes up. The next book is called The White Luck Warrior, so I expect her to play a big role, and, the entity that she was, having this ritual with. I'm not sure how he turned up or what he is, or if what was planted in her is what we should be paying attention to. But I guess we'll see.
Mm.
But
It's
there's
interesting, like, to look at the perspectives in this book a little bit, because if you look at her perspective, in contrast to Kellis's perspective, because 'cause they're both kind of being worshipped by the people around them, and there's a
yeah,
sense of ceremony. Of course, it's very different, whereas Kellis is all light,
yeah,
and still violence too. She is all blood and kinda gross and not very attractive. She's the flip side of that. Whereas Kellis has this, like, gorgeous beard, and I don't know, there's a lot of talk about his sky blue eyes.
yeah.
And then to look at the contrast between Esmenet and Sorweel, they're both in positions of power, so to speak, while
Hmm.
feeling quite powerless.
Yep.
Whereas Surreal comes from a high line of nobility, from this very powerful kingdom, the horsemen people, he ends up feeling like he's in a position where he's having to bow down to Kellis and bow down to Kellis's children, and
Yep.
it's very humiliating for him. And then with Esmenet, she's the opposite. She comes from slavery. I mean, she wasn't a slave
She was a
herself, right?
prostitute. Yeah.
Prostitute. She
Yeah.
was a prostitute. So she comes from a very meager background, and she feels like a little bit of imposter syndrome being in this empress position
Yeah.
after having come from such a lower class. But she's also in a similar position as Surreal in that she feels like she doesn't have a lot of leeway, and she doesn't really know what's going on with Kellis either. And then she has these children that she's having to oversee, and they're just very strange people. So it's she's in a strange position, just like Surreal, with similar conflicts too. Even though she doesn't have that sense of betrayal like Surreal does towards his father,
Right.
there's a lot of self-hatred. Like there's a lot of self-loathing and a lot of discomfort in her position and the attention she's getting and how to handle that. And he feels very uncomfortable still having the title of king and at the same time, the reputation that he has
Yeah.
based on his father's death. So I kind of feel like even though they're different, there's some strange, interesting contrasts and parallels between Surreal and Esmenet, and the
Yeah.
same with Nana Ferry and Kellis. What do you think about that?
Well said. And I think that in Esmenet's case, rather than feeling betrayed, she feels like she is the betrayer when it comes to Mimara. But
Yeah,
she has that guilt that she's living with, that and
that's
Mimara
true.
knows it, and that is this thing that is in the way of their relationship, and it can't be overcome. This fact that she sold her daughter into slavery, even though you could rationalize it and say, well, she did it to save her life, but there's this terrible fact that will never be out of the way. And Esmenet's guilt over being the betrayer in this instance is something that is
Mm.
driving her. It's hard. Again, she's in a corner. There's not much she can do in this situation. But yeah,
Yeah, one of my favorite passages in this book was the one about betrayal. I should have tabbed it, but it was in Surreal's passage, and it's a passage in which he realizes he's grown, and at one point in his life, he realizes he thought of betrayal as a thing, as
mm,
something like people are either faithful or they're not, and he's coming to realize that in so many words, it almost is like a stain rather than, and it almost seems to have a soul and it seems to have a living life of its own and it begets more lies and more betrayal. So it's this thing that almost seems to grow inside of him and that he can't escape. And I loved the way that Baker described betrayal in that way, that it's not so simple. And it's once you've done it, you can't quite escape it in such a simple way either. I feel like they're both grappling with that. So that was well said, though, about Esmenet and her relationship with Mimara.
yeah. I mean, he's doing such a great job of exploring these themes in different ways, in parallel ways with these different characters.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess we can go ahead and transition now to Mimara and to Akamian.
Yeah.
Wow, there's
And the
so
Mines of
much.
Moria. I mean,
Yes,
I'll
yes.
just, yeah.
But of course, we have to talk about how they intersect in the first place, because at this point in the story, Akamian is so this is interesting about Akamian too, is that he gets his quote unquote freedom in a sense. I mean, he's exiled. He's now a wizard. He doesn't have a school,
Right.
and he is bound, and that terrifies him.
Yeah.
Mimara finds him, and she says, "I think you're my father."
And
I
then
have
they have
memories of
sex, of
you.
course,
I
because
know. It's so disturbing.
it's so disturbing. Like, why, Baker? Why did you do this to us?
At least they didn't have it on the page, like, it did
Right.
fade to black a little bit, but I
Yeah.
was still creeped out when we're in her perspective, and she's feeling his hand on her back, and he's talking behind her.
Yeah.
It got under my skin so
The
much.
whole emphasis on how much she looks like her mother.
Yes.
I'm like, ah.
Teach me, teach me.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I do admire her persistence. I do admire her survival. Like, she is put through. One of the reasons why Esmenet feels so guilty is because she knows that not only was she sold into slavery, but she became a prostitute as well. And Esmenet knows what that is like.
Mm,
It was probably even worse for Mimara, being a slave prostitute. And this poor young woman is so scarred and so jaded, and so all she has left to give her some sense of purpose, some sense of empowerment in a world that has stripped her of everything, is to learn how to use this ability that she has, and I admire her persistence in going after Akamian to get that, because she knows that he's probably her only avenue to it. And at the same time, there's a part of her that is seeking a father. That abandoned child is looking for a father, and Bakker is, and of course, what is Akamian looking for? He's still feeling the loss of Esmenet and that void in his life. His wife was taken from him.
His mourning. Remember,
Yep,
he calls her his mourning.
yep. So that whole dynamic is just, you got some really scarred individuals who come together in the worst way, but at the same time, they do, because of her stubbornness and pursuing them and going on the quest, as it were, almost getting raped again by the skin eaters.
That had to be one of my I loved that scene. I have a hard time picking favorite scenes in the book, but I loved that
When
scene.
Akamian
Yes.
decides to rescue her.
When he
Yeah,
uses that compass or whatever that power was
yeah,
that caused the trees to come down, and I just imagined all of the skin eaters, even though Baker didn't use this terminology, in my head, they just, like, scattered like cockroaches in light. Like, that's what that's what came to my mind immediately, like, they were little roaches that, like, skid
yeah,
away, and then she looks at him and says, "Teach me." In that moment, I really appreciated it because this is a woman, like you said, who's come from slavery, who's come from being a prostitute herself, but who's come from such a horrific, traumatic background. In some ways, I can even understand in her mind her having sex with the commune because I've heard of that before. Women who have gone through so much. I can't speak for this myself, but I have heard before of women who have gone through so much sexual trauma, just thinking, oh, this is just what you do. Okay.
right,
But in that scene when she says, "Teach me," like, I can only imagine trying to put myself in her perspective, like, how this source of power, the ability to throw off this whole horde of rapers, like, what kind of power would that mean to somebody like her
right.
to learn how to have that kind of ability
Yep.
in this kind of world, from that kind of background?
Yeah.
I can only imagine how that really would have been a powerful moment for her.
At the same time, I feel like what a failure Akamian is, in that he does the right thing in rescuing her from that moment, in that moment, but I feel like that him allowing the sex earlier with Mimara to happen is a major moral failure on his part, because he knows he's a father figure to her. He knows that, and still allows that to happen. And I feel like he is such a compromised, sad. I like you. I don't want him to die. I'm kind of rooting for him as they're trying to survive, and Mimara even more so. But Akamian is such a compromised character. There are moments when he can be such a selfish dumbass, and
Yeah,
that was one of them. And
it
then
was
there are
awful.
moments when I feel like this poor broken guy, and just and all the stuff that's going on in his head as well. He's got not only his own trauma and issues, but he's got the issues and trauma of Seswatha going back, however many thousand years. So he's just a walking mess. Akamian is.
That's so well said. I mean, he's so hard to understand in the moment that he does have sex with her because
Right.
he's so much older and this is Esmenet's daughter.
Is he any better
It's
than those men who were, maybe marginally, but I feel
It's
like,
awful. It's
yeah,
disgusting. It was really hard to understand how he could do that. At the same time, I think Baker's trying to portray him in such a sense that he's been so lonely for
yeah,
so many years.
yeah,
And then the fact that she looks like Esmenet and the fact she lends herself to him in that way, I think I'm not saying that's excusable by any means, but
right,
I think he's just really, really weak and wretched. That's no other way to put it. But
yeah,
the second that he calls her, but that scene, it also, even though I loved that scene, how he got all the skin eaters to scatter. It's also it's so repulsive too because he claims her as his daughter in that moment. He's
I
like, "This
know.
is my daughter," and he does it to protect her, but
Yeah.
it's just so disturbing after everything that happened before.
Yep. Yeah, like make up your mind, dude. Are you seeing her as your daughter or are you seeing her as this potential, partner here? And I feel like he's so conflicted and messed up. And that act, they don't repeat it, but that act, I think, is a weight on their relationship. Like he could have been a father
Mhm.
figure to her. He could have said, "No, I probably not am your biological father, but here, let me teach you. Let me be a father figure to you." Instead, that thing happens, and that is a kind of a weight on their relationship, which is so dysfunctional, the whole
Oh
time.
god. It's
Um,
so bad. It's just so awful. It's disgusting. But
yeah.
I did get the sense, I mean, I did at the very least get the sense that he was trying to protect her in that moment.
Yes, I agree.
If
But
that
was
was
he
why he
protecting
did
her
it.
out of? I think you could say it could be a mixture of motives. Was he protecting her because he was being compassionate, or was he protecting her because he wanted, in some way, he still sees her as a sexual object, and he's like, "No, that's mine. You can't have that."
Oh, I didn't get it that sense. I
I don't
think
think that's it. I would never say that was his only reason for doing it, but I feel like
mm,
that's still going because she's Esmenet in a way. She looks
yeah,
like Esmenet, mine.
yeah.
So
Who
uh,
he loved, and I don't think he
yeah,
thought of Esmond as just a sexual object.
no, no,
But
no.
no, it's still there. I mean, it still lingers between them, like you said. There's still some tension there. And
Yes,
I felt like after a while that went away, fortunately, maybe because
when
of
they were
the
fighting to live, everything got stripped away. Like
Yeah.
you're just trying to, you're running like hell for your life. Everything else is out the window. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was, and I kinda bought into them being almost like father and daughter after a while. I don't know if you did.
In a way, yes, but I feel like there was also this awkward weight from the way they initially got together, and I don't think they ever entirely overcame that. They're able to forget it in those moments of extreme duress, as it were. But and she's starting to get what she wants. He's sort of agreeing to teach her, but he also is holding back stuff from her still. Like he's not
Mhm.
being square with her. He's not being open with her. He's not saying what he's really thinking in his head with her. And I
Like
feel
about
like,
the languages that she would
yeah,
never have the
the fact that
capacity to learn.
she's like, well, yeah, okay, I'll teach you, and then really thinking, but you'll never be able to learn because you're too old, and the chances are you'll fail. I feel like there's a dishonesty there coming from him toward her. So I don't know. Nothing ever comes out happy in these books, so I just can't think that Mimara is going to learn magic, be empowered, and then be a heroic character that I can get behind. But we'll see.
She does essentially become a witch. She does get her wish.
She's on her way. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
she's
think
on
he's
her way.
quite. So she was able to hold that light that I came
Mhm.
created, but she still hasn't entirely committed because she was able to hold the Korai, right? If she were actually a 100%
Oh,
magic user, that would have killed her to hold that.
that's right, because she was causing harm to Akamiya and just being in proximity with him with that
Yeah.
Kore.
And what do you think about her having the judging eye? That's the title of the
Oh my
book.
goodness. Was that
Yeah.
like the Eye of Sauron? Is that not
Yeah.
that?
She's able to see the stain that
Yeah.
happens when you use magic. Like the old narrative was, you're damned if you use magic. You're whatever hell it is in that world. You're done. You're one of the damned by using it. It is unholy. It is unclean. And she actually sees that, even though Kelos has said, okay, from now on, I'm God, and from now on, people who use magic are cool. And Mimara is like actually able to see, no, there is some decay. There is that the mark that she sees on Kelhus and sees it on. We have to talk about him, but on Cleric,
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
but she is. she's got something that most people don't have, this judging eye. She has this true view of everything. So she's super special among people who have the propensity to magic somehow.
This is an area where I still had a few question marks.
Yeah.
So it seemed to me like the judging eye, like it was an operation early on in the story, right? Like she came into the story with that ability, but
Yeah.
it's I got the impression it became stronger
Yep.
maybe after her powers started to kick in a little bit.
Perhaps, but that it was only acknowledged fairly late in the story when Akamian realized, oh, you actually can see what's at the heart of me. You
Mhm.
see what a corrupt being I am. There's Akamian's self-loathing coming to the fore there, which is another part of why I find it very hard to get behind him. You know, is that he hates himself.
Well, she sees him as damned too, which is kind
Yeah.
of frightening.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, and I felt for her storyline too, since I guess since we're gonna go ahead and talk about the non-man who's
Yeah.
with them,
Cleric.
I thought it was really interesting to learn more about the non-man and non-men, to learn about the lore between the humans of Irwa, I think, and the non-men.
Yeah.
I wrote down the name of what it was, and I can't find it now. See if I
He's
can
a
find it.
non-man erratic. His real name is
He's
Incarial, apparently.
Incurial, yeah. He's a nobleman.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and he is able to wield magic in a way that's probably way beyond what a human could.
Yeah. And
So,
early on in the mines, I keep calling it mines. I know that's not what it's called, those dark halls or
I mean, there are mines
tunnels.
there too. That's where they got the Nimil or whatever he calls it.
Yeah. I guess Akamian tells them the stories about the non-men, but there's also the story about the Emorma. And I know he mentions them as well. Those are the human slaves, but
Mostly women, I
specifically,
think, right?
yeah,
They were
concubines.
kind of like
Yes.
sex slaves. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm. The concubines, the human concubines, to the non-men. And I think like there were images in the sculptured walls of these Imwarma. And I got the sense that she kept on looking at the Imwarma, who were these slaves, these concubine women, and then looking at Cleric, who's a non-man, and thinking of herself and thinking of Cleric. Did you get that? That there was some sort of premonition she was having, or some sort of connection she was making with all of that
yeah,
going into.
definitely. And we learned that the non-men are. I mean, there's no one in this world who is just good, right? The non-men
Mm.
they exploited these humans in a way that was awful by making these women into slaves, sex
They
slaves.
bred them underground in darkness?
Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
awful. And so Incarial must have been part of that. He seems to know about it, right? He does his the way his head is now. He's lived so long that he's like a sieve. Some of his memories are there sometimes they're not. And the issue of his sanity is very much in question, I would say. But
Strange, man. I like the description of the fused teeth.
up with the fused teeth. Why, Baker? Why do you do this? So these are not pretty elves. These are disturbed, crazy individuals who I bet there's some assassins among them, though.
Assassin elves, hey.
Yeah. Baker's elves are so depressing. I mean, they're not even that pretty either.
No.
So yeah, but this place that they go into, the layers that he gives it, it's just insane. The levels of darkness, the descent into that. Kill Alias, is that how Algus? Kill Algus?
Thank
My
you. We'll just go with that. Somebody
yeah,
can correct us in the comments if we're
yeah.
mispronouncing anything.
Yeah, I'm pronouncing it with a hard C. I got the impression somewhere or other that it was a hard C, but I could be wrong. So if you say Sil Algus, that's fine. But this place is just amazing. The most fascinating part of the book for me was this.
Yes, I
Baker's
loved it.
riffing on the Mines of Moria, but going in his own demented, crazy way to exploring the very depths of everything. So, what did you think of it?
Oh, I was fascinated by it. I just was fascinated by it. It was kind of like what I was saying earlier on in the discussion, just how much darker can it get? How much deeper can it go? And it keeps going. And not only that, it's just so fascinating because you were talking about the darkness of humanity, which we also explore through those pathways. But it also was interesting to me that before we go into these tunnels, before we go into these hallways, into these ancient ruins and places. Before we enter, I got the sense of like the skin eaters just being wicked people. I mean, they leave their dead on the road without a second thought. Akamian was wondering about the rules of the slog. Like,
No
is there
loyalty.
no
Yeah.
loyalty, no sense of sympathy for those who have fallen? Akamian makes himself sound very noble in contrast to them.
Except that he knows he's using them, and he keeps
Yeah, that's
reminding
true.
himself he feels guilty about what he's doing. He's essentially lying to them and using them to get to where he wants to go. You know.
Yes, that's true. For the coffers. And, so I got the sense like there's just no love between any of these people. They don't care about each other. They're quite vile. I felt scared for Mimara the whole time. I thought, what if the Kamian goes to sleep? What's gonna happen to her? She's
Right.
not safe with any of these men. She's very vulnerable. I felt so disturbed in this group with this company. The most disturbing motley crew I've ever followed in fantasy might be this one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. You have cleric who's obviously a nut job of some kind, and then you have the leader who Cossiter, Lord Cossiter, who
That sounds
seems
right.
he's totally
That's his
unhinged
name.
as well. His main power seems to be that he has one of the Korai. I don't see him being other than just very like brooding and kind of like very taciturn. I don't know what his superpower is, but he seems to have a very strong grip on this group through fear. And then you have
Mhm.
all the others, among them some interesting, cast of characters. The one, Soman Dutta, who goes by Soma, who builds up a kind of, he seems to have something for Mimara. Like at,
Mhm, yeah.
in the end, he runs away and abandons her. But
Oh,
it was so hard. It was like ultimately there are no heroes. Baker's just rubbing our faces in our lack of true heroism here. But even he runs for his life and leaves her, and that becomes a wedge between them where I feel like there was something maybe developing there. Like he carries her through a lot of that maze and that chase, and but at the very end she loses his courage or whatever and leaves her. But what
that's
a
what
place!
that's the thing that was so impressive to me is he was even willing to leave her behind, but
Yeah,
she never leaves Akamian behind, and
yeah,
Akamian never gives up on her. Like, they
yeah.
don't give up on each other, which
They're
is
like
why I said
two drunks
I was
leaning against each other, trying to get out of there. Yeah, it's just,
yeah.
and the moment that made me laugh was when she had been dragging him, and he was saying something about them, the not orcs, but the Srunk, following the trail of his poop. That when she was dragging him all that way, like
Oh, that's right.
yeah. I mean, what happens in there? There's that one moment when they find the one dude from the other company of Scalpoi, the guy who
Mm.
Akamian somehow knows, like cut him open, and they cut him open. They take his heart out, and there's an eyeball in his heart. What is that, Baker? What is this? What are you
It's
doing?
staring at all of them like it.
And there again, you have to go back to the title, the judging eye, right? Are we basically being faced with our own grotesqueness, our own like everything that is noble about us seems like a delusion in this world, that we are essentially animals that pretend not to be animals, that we live in with our dominant experiences are fear and hate and lust, and there's just nothing nothing in the end that seems very ennobling about us,
Mm,
and I feel like
mhm.
in that moment we're seeing this poor lost soul in there with this eyeball in his heart, seeing us to our very core, like we're just a bunch of scared animals.
I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but I got the sense that, and I wanna say it was through Mimara's perspective when she was using her eye, that there was maybe it was a commune. I got the sense that there was an eye that they felt an eye in their hearts. Do you remember something like that? Like, they all felt an eye in their
I
hearts?
think there was a moment when she feared that that would happen to her. What happened to that guy?
Oh, is that what that was?
I
Okay.
think it was her just sort of fearing this. Oh, what if that happens to me? What if I end up with an eyeball in my heart? You know, as they're running away from all these Srank and members of their company are being knocked off one after the other. And the poor donkeys, too, get chopped to bits
I
by the.
know. I know.
I
That was
felt
sad.
that was okay. He even had a nod to Bill the pony in here, really, which from
Bastion or
yeah, with Bastion and the other mules getting, but they get chomped to bits. Bill makes it back. We know that. That's the difference between Lord of the Rings and Second Apocalypse. Bill survives, but Bastion gets chopped into mincemeat without hesitation. So yeah,
yeah, that's sad. It was
yeah.
sad. It was interesting though, like, there were some moments at the end that I feel like I actually feel like I need to go back and reprocess some more. So,
I
for
don't know if
example
I ever want to do that to experience this again, but yeah.
well, no,
Uh,
I mean, I'm talking about, like, the gates part, when she holds open the
yes,
gates. The gates were no
yes,
longer guarded, and then
with the
she
Korai.
says, "I guard them. I
Yeah.
hold the gates."
You mean when she was able to use the Korai to keep
Mhm.
back the uh, the non-man king who had taken over all Cleric's body in that moment? She saves them with her Korai,
Yeah.
seemingly. Although we don't get it, Baker leaves it very ambiguous too. Like he stops when she has it out, and there's that big glow coming from it, and then they're running again. It's just like, what? Wait, what happened? You know.
Yeah, I didn't feel like okay, it wasn't just me. I just felt like I maybe missed something. I
No, he
wasn't
skips
really
the
sure.
moment. He skips how did this go down? We don't actually know. But we just get the impression that maybe she saved them by using the Korai.
They really
And
come to depend on her. I think they realize that they depend on her, and then
mhm,
they depend on a commune, and by depending on them, I almost felt as though they maybe revised the rules of the slog or their understanding of what that was about.
yeah, the
Maybe.
whole time I kept thinking the only reason they are trying to save Akamian is they know they're going to need his power to survive
Mhm.
this.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I don't think it was
100%.
like let's be nice and help whoever's lagging behind. It's like we need this idiot, grab him. Um,
Mm.
so and at the very
True.
end, do you think that that is Cleric again in his senses, who's coming back? Because that's he leaves us off with a cliff.
Yes. That's a
Has
good
the,
question. I don't know.
has the
That's a good
king left
question.
him alone now, and he's coming back to the group, or are they in big doo doo, deep doo doo here? I don't know.
That's true. I remember there was a line too before that when, from Imara's perspective, they realized they lost Cleric, and it sounded like it was just decided. We lost him. Let's move on.
Right,
And I thought about, oh no, they lost Cleric. And then I thought about it for a minute. I'm like, wait, but we didn't see him die. So
right,
we're probably gonna see him again. And sure enough, we see him again. But you raise a good question about that.
yeah. And again, it's not about genuine like, oh no, Cleric, I really like that guy. It's more like, oh crap, we lost Cleric. We really needed him to get out of here. It's always this like selfish, like we are fundamentally selfish beings. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, I also want to bring up too a commune's dreams, which
Yes.
changed. I mean, they
Yes.
were already changing for a while there,
Yep.
but going into the depths of darkness, into this hell realm, so to speak,
Yep.
he's able to see.
Seswatha's, yeah. And we learned that Seswatha was banging the king's wife.
Yeah.
So now there's quite so all these supposedly noble mythical characters from the past are a bunch of
Yeah.
cheaters and cowards and just humanity is so disappointing, Joanna.
It really is. It really is. Yeah, I also wanna say too sorry, I'm gonna pivot really quickly and come back to
Sure.
this. I wanted to also mention there was a talk about how the humans who betrayed the non-men caused the non-men king, the one I guess they went to the grave of
Yeah.
there, he cursed humanity. He didn't make any distinction with the types of humans, but he cursed humanity with being fractious,
Yeah.
which means, I mean, I got the sense of the fact that humans are always going to be dividing into to factions
Yeah.
and causing war, and this is going to be an eternal thing with humans. This is a constant part of human nature, is that we divide into factions and we conquer. We fight and conquer.
Yeah.
At the same time as that's the case, as humans are cursed in that way, it seems like we're equally cursed if we follow an aspect emperor. So I just thought that was interesting to think about
Yeah.
that aspect of humanity.
Yeah. It's
Are we
almost as
better off being in factions, or are we better off following this one leader?
yeah. Yeah. It's almost as if the non-men, we wipe them out, but in the process we have such a legacy that we'll never be at peace, that our own destructiveness will get us in the end as well, you know. But
Yeah, yeah.
and he comes back as a ghost thing that possesses cleric and all of that, and that was just so, again, creepy. We've used the word a few times, but I feel like it applies very well here too.
Well, yeah, and it made you wonder the whole time, like your high king or cleric's cousin. I guess it's his cousin, right? Was the king. Your
Yeah.
cousin wanted all of humanity to die. Like,
Right.
he was very against humanity. And I
Right.
think Cleric was trying to talk reason to his cousin at one point too about it, about
I
trying
think
to.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
before he got possessed.
Mhm.
I wonder what Cleric's end game is too, or if he has
Yes.
one. Like, he seems to be, he could easily wipe out everybody there, but he seems to be doing Lord Cossiter's bidding the whole time.
Yeah.
Right? He's working for this guy. Okay. How did Lord Cossiter get this over Cleric, where he's his boss, kind of? I don't know. But it
Yeah.
feels like Cossiter maybe playing at being more in control than he really is.
Mm.
Cleric could just at one moment just squish them all like a bug if he wanted to.
Sounds like it. That's what it seemed like.
Yeah.
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 Have such an interesting company. Interesting group of characters.
Also interesting that Akamian doesn't know who Cleric is. Incariel is not a name that he knows. And
Oh,
through
yeah.
Seth
Through
Swatha's
history.
memories, he
Yeah.
should know who this dude is, right?
He's
He's
like,
like,
as much as I've studied history and lived it through Saswatha's memories, I
yeah.
don't know who this is.
So I figure we're going to find out who he really is.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
But also just going back to Akamian's dreams. Yeah, he starts to reveal more mundane, everyday aspects at first that the other mandate schoolmen don't focus on or don't dream about, or if they do dream about it, they don't really pay attention. And
Yeah.
it starts to occur to him to pay attention to those things. And that's when greater mysteries start to become revealed.
Yes. So he wants to find out the truth about
Mm.
Kelhus. That's what he's all about. And it's petty in a way because it's vengeance. It's all about his vengeance.
Mhm.
Um, and he's after the truth about Kelhus. And these dreams are leading him just bit by bit. The little breadcrumbs are being put out for him. And finally, he gets in the end that dream when he's being dragged by Mimara and leaving a trail of his own poop, behind him. he's, he's having that dream about, finally he gets this knowledge that yes, there is a map, and ironically, it is with the coffers, which he's been lying about all this time. It's a map to Ishual, which is this refuge that Kelmomas, the ancient king, had created because he knew that humanity was in deep trouble. And that is where the Dunyain have been all these centuries. And plotting what? What are they all about? What are they doing? And is Kelhus bringing about some ultimate plan of the Dunyain there, or is he acting on his own? It's hard to say, because when he was originally called from this refuge by his father, by Moengus in the earlier trilogy, it seemed like it was happening to some degree against the will of the powers that be in Ishual, right? That there was like Moengus was a maverick among the Dunyain, and he had some agenda, and he called his son out of there in order to achieve this agenda. So I don't know if Kelhus is doing the bidding of the Dunyain or not. in all of this, right?
That's a good question. I got the impression that he's doing something different, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, lots to find out here.
Yeah, yeah, there are so many this is a very complex story in many ways.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's one that can easily consume you too because we're following these characters very closely. So it is kind of contained in some sense, though it still has a great amount of travel. Wow. I mean, I have more questions than answers, I think, by the end of this book.
Yeah. Yeah. So many. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Anything else you want to say?
Uh, yeah, I'm gonna read something else where I at least have the illusion that I have some power and some purpose and meaning. But we'll come back to this series in about a month or so, and we'll get through it somehow or other. I just keep coming back to Bakker's brilliance as a writer, and I deeply appreciate his willingness to look unflinchingly at our most base instincts and our most primal nature, I suppose you could say. So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. What an incredible writer, incredible character work, psychology of characters, themes, world building. It was just such a I want to say it was a treat to read it, but it was pretty disturbing as well. It was a pretty fascinating read. That's
Yeah.
just what I'll say. It was a
Yes.
fascinating reading experience. And Philip, I just want to thank you so much for coming on my channel to talk about this one. And I'm excited for our next discussion.
Always a pleasure, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
All right. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.